Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. I'm your host, Tom. With me today is my co-host, Massimo. Massimo, how are you?
Doing great.
That was a long pause.
Well, I said it,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, I could talk about my face, but that's all I talk about now. So let's think of something else. And I have a big party this weekend that I'm looking forward to for my grandfather, who is
Okay.
94. Yeah, I'm always excited
Yeah,
for that.
Father's Day. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and my
Yeah, yeah.
birthday's in a week and a bit, and my cousin's birthday is in a few days. So we kind of do this joint thing.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, something to look forward to.
I didn't get you anything for your birthday. Are you expecting something?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not surprised with you. That's just not who you are. It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you have 11 days now to figure it out if you
What do you
want.
want?
Your gift to me is just friendship.
I give it every day. Yeah.
It's funny. Kat asked me what I want, and I honestly haven't told her yet. I don't know. Like I don't really. It sounds lame, but I don't need anything.
Like when you were a kid and it was your birthday, it's like, I want Legos, and you didn't have
Yeah,
any
yeah,
money.
yeah.
So that was your birthday was the only opportunity to actually to actually get something when you're older. Like I remember that. My mom was a little bit more maybe she wouldn't always get everything she wanted right away, but my dad growing up, whenever he'd want something, he'd just go and buy it
Yeah,
because whatever he did. And
yeah,
so when it came to his birthday, I was like, man, I can't buy you anything. You already get it. And he's like, yeah, I do. Like he would just admit it. He's like, I want something, I get it. And
yeah.
anyways, I just
I
got
think
him
we'll just do a nice dinner. That's our thing now. So,
yeah, 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 some nice mushy food back to your
yeah.
face.
How are you
Anyways,
doing?
me? Oh yeah, no, good, good. I'm doing great actually. Yeah, gonna be my first Father's Day this weekend as a father.
Oh yeah,
So
a real one,
Erica,
not of a dog, a real
yeah,
child
no,
now.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I kind of feel a bit bad because yeah, we don't pay as much attention to Maddie now that Sophia's around. But anyways, that's a separate point. But no, yeah, I'd be good. I know Erica and she's probably scheming something. I was like, I don't want anything big. She's like, I know, but she's gonna do something big anyway. So we'll
Nice.
see. Even receiving gifts, it's like I gotta put on a fake smile and be like, oh, thank you so much. And then I don't know. So
Yeah.
not my jam. But no, I'm good. I'm good otherwise. All right, well, let's get into it here. Today, we're talking about webinars. This is an interesting one, coming up a little bit more with clients, our clients, people who are looking, hey, you know what, I want to start doing some webinars. And I think really to start answering, okay, how do you actually go about executing a good webinar? It's good to answer why. Why do you even want to do a webinar in the first place? So let's start there, Mass. When you chat with folks, what are some of the big reasons they want to do a webinar?
I mean, it's one of the best methods to train the masses per se without having to be on site. A lot of people these days also record them and reuse them. So there's some
Hmm.
of that where it can be kind of almost like evergreen. Like, for example, a lot of our clients are mortgage brokers. You could do a webinar on things to think about as a first time home buyer. And
Yeah.
that will be pretty evergreen. You could probably redo that every 3 years or something. So it's a great way of one to many. It's a great way of creating some content and really just a good way to educate people.
Yeah.
I personally like them, have a controlled way to ask questions, and there's all kinds of things. But
As a
those are the
host,
first
you're saying.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are the
for
things
sure.
that come to my mind. I don't know if there's any other ones from you that
Well, yeah,
are
I think
valid
there's a
to you.
couple other dimensions there. I think it's actually a nice lead tool, especially if you're doing maybe some online stuff. It's maybe another part of the funnel, right? When it's okay, I'm not ready to come in and talk about my mortgage and have a conversation with you, but hey, I could open up a Zoom and just sit there and learn some stuff for 30 minutes. Maybe even once they're actually in maybe a drip campaign with you, it's a blast or something like that, saying, hey, Massimo, I know you wrote in a couple days ago asking about mortgage stuff. I'm actually running a webinar next week. I think it'd be perfect for you. Why don't you register? Come on out, check it out, and we can have a good conversation there. So it's a little bit of a lower barrier thing for people to come and actually start engaging with you. I think another really interesting thing, we talked to Ryan Wiley last week, and he did this more in person. We're talking about webinar, more virtual, and I think that's where the tech play comes in. But he did this in person. It's the same concept, one to many, but he did it on behalf of his referral partners, which I think
Right.
was such a cool idea. So, again, I'll use you as the example. If you're a realtor that I work with, it's like, hey, Massimo, I'm running a thing that's saying, hey, what should people be thinking about rates in this environment? Or, hey, rates just changed, Bank of Canada. What does that mean for you and your mortgage? There's a lot of questions realtors are getting, and they don't always have the perfect answer to that. Some do, but some don't. So if you can go out and say, hey, Massimo, on our co-branded webinar. You can send it to all your clients. We're just going to teach them. We're not going to sell them anything. It's going to be purely educational. That's really exciting to your realtors. It gives you that value add, even if it maybe you aren't working with them right now actively with clients. Maybe it's someone you want to work with, but hey, Massimo, we've been having a little bit of conversation. Maybe this can be a taste to see how we work together, and it makes them look good ultimately, right? And I think that goes so far. And it can also, if you are saying the right things, or depending the subject of your talk, if you are convincing their clients that, hey, actually they can afford maybe that house that they always wanted to buy but weren't certain if they could do it, then you're looking really good in your realtor's shoes, and they're really going to want to work with you, right? So it actually becomes a way that you can build very strong ties with your realtors. Or
Totally.
really any, I mean, even financial planners too, right? I mean, I don't know if you've seen that, brokers going out and reaching out to financial planners and seeing if their clients are interested. Have you seen that?
Realtors are kind of the big one, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of financial trigger points or life trigger points where someone would want to talk to a mortgage broker or learn more. Maybe you just run into a bunch of money and you want to buy an investment property. So
right.
a financial planner might send it over, or an accountant might send that lead over. And
Yeah.
so there's lots of different angles you could spin, but probably for obvious reasons, the realtors have been the biggest one just because buying a home needs a mortgage. Yeah.
And I think it depends the nature of the talk, right? I think like what you said, right? It's like, okay, how do you deal with maybe you've just inherited a lot of money because some distant relative, passed away, right? Or something like that. How do you
Yeah.
deal with that? And is it, the right time to buy a house because of that? Okay, that might be good for your financial planner partners. Okay, but if it's actually, hey, how do you upgrade from a one bedroom condo to your first home with a backyard? I don't know,
Yeah.
right? How do you make that leap? Okay, that might be more relevant to your realtors. So I think it's more about the topic than anything. But yeah, like you said, I think it's more commonly realtors. But I think anyone listening, I would say, hey, don't be afraid to get creative and specific. That's something we always talk about on this podcast is, a lot of people want to make it very general and I can capture anyone, but there's a lot of value in being super specific and saying, hey, if this is the event that's happened to you right now, I have the perfect webinar for it. It's going to allow you to, curate that content a lot better, and it's going to be a lot easier to market, to actually go out and say, "Hey, join my webinar," because it's so specific. Cool. Well, let's get into the tech side of things. Let's get into the meat and the potatoes here. So, like we've done a lot of these kind of tech reviews before we get into, specific platforms. Always like to establish the kind of criteria in which we're evaluating them. So, I'll put you on the hot seat, Mass. You're a mortgage broker. You want to put on a webinar. You've never done it before. What do you care most about right now? What's the number one thing for you?
The first thing that comes to mind is the ease of joining. If that, like for myself running the
Mm-hmm.
event, but
Okay.
also for my clients, like I don't want them to have to download 3 applications and
Yeah.
upgrade their computer for it to work. Like preferably it would be something that would just like work in the browser, or just with 2, 3 clicks,
2 clicks. Yeah.
clients could get in. They don't have to make an account and then verify that account and all that stuff, or God forbid, have to pay. I don't think any of them make you do that, but maybe some do as a client.
Oh,
And
you're
then,
saying like, hey, pay for the software just to join my webinar.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No.
think that's we're safe
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah.
that'd be the first one, ease of use for myself and the clients. And mostly that relates to like just starting up the software and watching, like
If you had to pick you or your client, which one would you prioritize?
client.
Well, I think this goes back to what we talked to Doug Adlam. Oh, it's been 2 weeks ago now, and he talked about his journey with Finmo. I think that's a good parallel. Not that it's exactly the
Yeah.
same, and there's a lot of differences, but I think a lot of people have that hat sometimes, where it's like, hey, I'm picking a software. What's going to be best for me, right? And what makes it super easy to set up, what this and that. But having that vision or that perspective of, okay, actually, what's best for my client, that's a big differentiator. So not a
Yeah.
lot of people think that way.
Yeah.
And I think, you can, as the person running that webinar, you can work through some friction, right? Okay, it's a bit tricky to set up. Okay, but I really want to make this work. I'm gonna push through it. If you're a client, they experience any friction at all,
Like, they're
see you
done.
later, right?
Yeah.
Goodbye, right? So
Yeah.
I
There's no
think that's
point in
exactly
having a
right.
great
Yeah.
tool that
Yeah.
you love if no one shows up. So,
Yeah,
or
yeah, that's a
can't
good
get
way to
in.
put it. Or can't register or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And the bar for what is easy or hard to actually set up is way, way, way lower for your clients, right?
Yeah.
Any type of friction, they're just gonna give up. So no, I said the same thing. I think it's ease of use in terms of, yeah, setting it up for you. I also included actually just like running. the actual webinar. Okay, now that I'm in there, how do I take questions? Can I unmute someone? Are they all automatically muted by default and I get to choose? So ease of use, I think that's one big bucket. And then the other two I quickly jotted down. We did one of these about actually meetings, right? So virtual
Yeah.
meeting software and quality and cost, right? I mean, those are obviously huge factors. Depending where you are in your journey, like we say for all these things, different things will be important for different people, especially I think when it comes to cost. But ultimately, I think, yeah, the ease of use is usually where people go first. And I think it probably is the most important, if not a top three consideration, probably one of the first things you should look at for sure. Okay, cool. Well, let's dive right into it here. Let's do a couple examples. What do we use? I mean, we run a ton of webinars for us, and we use Zoho Webinar, which is interesting because when we did the video on virtual meetings, we don't really use Zoho Meeting.
Yeah.
Right. And for anyone listening, Blue Mortgage is built on Zoho. So we're Zoholics, as the people in our community would say. I think a lot of people know that listening, but Zoho, it's a suite of products. They have really everything under the sun, including, as we're talking about here, webinar and meeting software. So yeah, for our business, we say, yes, we want to use Zoho Webinar for webinars, but not Zoho Meeting for meetings. So why do you think there's that difference there? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
actually genuinely curious.
I think the biggest factor, because honestly, we talk about some of those levers, quality, cost, stuff like that. The quality isn't the best. It could be better in
Yeah.
Zoho Webinar. The reason why we chose it, I think, is just the integration. That's the biggest one. When someone joins a webinar, and Mariah's really dialed it up too. I was looking at the webinar I ran last week, and I actually know where they're coming from, like if they came from social or from a
Yeah, right.
campaign or whatever.
Yeah, all the
So
different links. Yeah, yeah.
in general, the integration back to our CRM, which is Zoho, is really good. And we didn't have to do
Yeah.
a thing. It just all works. And so we can do drips after, we can send out recordings, but all of that, if they attended or not, is stored in the CRM. So that was our biggest thing. And we kind of looked at that and said, well, cost is free. We're already paying for Zoho. Quality is okay, not the best, but the integration is great. And now we know our heavy users and not, and we can send out the drips very easily. So that's why we did it. And then why we don't use Zoho Meeting for our demos and our meetings is quality and ease of use kind of trumped integration in that world. Where when someone's early in the process, I think we made the call where it's like, we want no friction when they're looking at this tool. If they're
Yeah.
already a client and they know us and they're joining a webinar, they could have a bit more friction versus our integration, I guess. But that was the
Yeah.
reason I think we chose Zoom for our
I think that's
demos and
right.
stuff.
How I view it, and I think this is right, which is first of all, quality. So I think in a one-on-one call, you need super top quality. You don't
Right.
want to
Yeah.
be able to, okay, what did you say? Can you repeat that? Now, webinar, you don't really want that either, but it's more forgiving, right? In that there's a recording, or hey, it's not this interactive thing that requires lots of back and forth.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
quality we were able to compromise on a little bit more, not too much. You never want it to be too much, of course, that people can't even watch the webinar, but it became less important. And that's, I mean, honestly, a lot of what we talk about in these, where depending on your use case, the weighting, how much you weight each of these, is how you determine what's best for you, right? If someone listening, you might be saying, no, the way I run a premier business, I want everything to go off without a hitch. I want it to look like they're joining, the most professional possible thing ever. Then, hey, maybe quality is a little bit more important. But for us, we said, okay, well, the integration, easy use side, I think, was much more important. For me, the other big thing with it is, I don't know why, but I just found that the webinar experience, when you're actually in the webinar, was actually very, very competitive to some of these other things that we're going to be talking about, like Zoom, like some of these other things. Like the actual, when we're hosting those meetings, I think it's actually quite good. And so just to give a couple examples, the features that exist, first and foremost, you establish everyone who's a host, everyone who's a participant. Participants are all muted by default, and then you can choose to invite people to talk. There's a chat area. I'm pretty sure there's a Q&A area. And the Q&A is really cool now because people can write their questions and you can answer them there. Or what you can do is you can click it and it can pop up on the screen for everyone to see, hey, this is what Tom just asked. And now I'm going to go in and actually answer the question. So a lot of those different types of features of actually once you're in the webinar and you're interacting with people and you're trying to make it an interactive session is actually quite good, quite competitive, I think, right? I mean, I couldn't think of one thing that Zoom has that Zoho Webinar didn't.
No, we just did a Zoom webinar yesterday, and I think it was the exact same. I don't even know if they had that feature where the question pops up.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
there you go, right? Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's
No,
very good. You're right. Yeah.
no, for sure. And I think the other thing that we like about it too is that it actually is quite easy to kind of set up to set the reminders before and the follow-ups after. Lots of good stuff there. So yeah, across the board, there wasn't too much. It was just really, yeah, when compared to a one-on-one meeting, it's about that quality. It's not 100%, but it's 90%, and we were okay with that for webinars. So let's switch gears. Maybe quality is really important to you. Maybe you say, yeah, I get it for you guys. It's a little bit different for me. I need that high quality. It's the most important thing for me. I'm at the stage of my business that I'll pay a lot for it. What would you say to those folks?
The one that comes to mind is Zoom.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I would call them a leader in
Yeah,
many categories, not just they do phones now and all kinds of stuff, but I would say the meeting and the webinar is definitely their best of breed, and the
they do phones
quality
now.
is, yeah, they have Zoom phone, they have Zoom chat,
Oh,
Zoom
I was thinking like a
email.
physical photo. I was like,
Oh
oh
no,
God, okay,
maybe
yeah,
they do, but yeah,
yeah. No,
software.
virtual.
Yeah, they
Yes.
even do
Oh
email
God.
now,
Oh
and
really? Oh
Slack
okay.
competitor. They try to have
Yeah.
you all in this thing. I've yet to be to a Zoom webinar that is crappy in terms of quality. I don't know how they do it. They have some compression algorithms, I guess, where like no matter
Yeah.
what your internet, like I've taken calls and I've joined Zoom webinars like on my phone in spotty internet on a train, and it's like still good. So
Yeah.
anyways, they're kind of like the Netflix of streaming, where like you can watch a Netflix show on your phone in freaking rural Alberta and you'll be fine.
Yeah. That's right.
So they figured it out. So
Yeah.
definitely Zoom.
Yeah, so I just quickly looked at it, and yeah, Zoom webinar, $1,000 a year. It's not nothing. It's not like, oh, whatever, $100 a year, F it, whatever, we'll just do it. It's something quite substantial. It is the standard, right? Many people you'd send this to probably have already registered for a Zoom webinar in the past. They know what to expect, know how to get in there. They're very used to it. So, the friction for people joining is, I'd say that much, not a ton less, but definitely less than even really anything else, just simply from familiarity. And yeah, the actual interaction within the webinar. They didn't have all those features that Zoho Webinar has, which is interesting, but it wasn't a limiting
No,
issue, right? It
they
wasn't
still
like,
had
well,
Q&A. It just
yeah,
didn't
crap,
pop
we
up.
can't we
Yeah,
can't move on here, right? The
yeah.
person just read the question, and so that's okay. So, and I think that's always indicative of Zoho. They always do a lot of features, and that has its pros and cons with it, of course. But no, Zoom with it, you are paying a little bit more. It's a little bit more to set up because Zoom probably doesn't have too many out of the box integrations, but they're getting more and more, of course. And so you'll have to get those things set up, but once you have that, if you're willing to maybe have a little bit more pain on your end, so cost and setup, then you're just going to have that much better of an experience for your clients. So again, it kind of depends where you're at.
This is one that I know because I was looking at Zoom and some of their AI integrations. We'll throw that buzzword in here, but
Oh yeah, now we're going to the top of the algorithm. Anytime there's a AI, I gotta say it once an episode. Yeah. Anyways,
they
go
have all
go ahead.
kinds out of
Yeah.
box like Firefly and Fathom and all these guys. So
Oh, like the note taker. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
so they
yeah.
would transcribe your whole webinar if you're making it into like written copy, which I think some people do on their websites for SEO and stuff. So I guess that would be the only benefit for meetings. It's good, and Zoom integrates there too. And I know Zoho Meeting, for example, doesn't
So the
integrate with those
Fathom AI
players.
that you've seen, it can actually join a webinar and it
Yes.
knows the difference that it's a webinar and not a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I
that's
don't know if it knows the difference, but you can add it to a webinar. I don't know if it'll auto join, but Adam B, him in the
yeah.
Cloven side, and
Yeah,
he dabbles with all this stuff and he does a lot of webinars through Zoom. And he was telling me that it transcribes his webinars now. So that's just another, I guess, piece in there. Zoom is kind of the front runner, so everyone wants to integrate with them, where
yeah,
Zoho Meetings kind of in the bundle of Zoho apps, but they don't have those integrations. You could write code to do it probably, but
for
anyways.
sure. But just a couple more hoops to jump through, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's right. And I think, yeah, really outside of the Zoho suite, Zoom actually probably does have the most integrations,
Yeah.
right? Because they are that leader, which is interesting. So, okay. The last one I'll throw out here, just because this is the only one I've ever used as a host perspective. Oh, it was an interesting experience. Is GoToMeeting. Well, they do GoToMeeting, but they have GoToWebinar. They kind of like all these
Yeah.
things where they started with the meeting and then they expand to webinar. Now they have a phone, so it's similar to Zoom. It was not good. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
I had to share my screen, and I feel like I'm a pretty techie person. I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but man, it was tough. It was really, really tough. I think it was a really good case of over engineering where they thought they were being smart and sneaky and say, no, you know what, you just have to click here. And it was not good. And it would end up being that because we were doing a webinar with a partner and that partner preferred to use that for whatever reason. And yeah, it was a lot of hoops to jump through. I mean, we do say, hey, do you know what? Be willing to jump through some hoops if it means it's better for your client. But there's also a limit to that too, right? If the hoops are so high or the bar is so
Yeah.
high that you literally can't jump through them, that's a limiting issue, right? It's like, yes, there's be willing to endure some pain to get it there, but there's only so much pain you really are able to endure before you just say, I give up. This is too much for me, right?
It's
So
kind of like whenever I
yeah.
see a link from someone that's like join the WebEx, I'm like, oh God, this software
No,
sucks.
one of those, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if GoTo is that bad, but I can imagine. Um,
Yeah, I wanted to throw this in next. I had that experience, and I remember just sitting there and clicking there and saying, "Oh my goodness, this is
there's not very
interesting."
many of these
Yeah,
softwares, eh? Like I
no,
cannd think of any other ones that
no.
people
I was doing
host
some research
webinars
for
on.
this, and like there was some like smaller ones I've heard, but I think it's hard to do actually. I do think that it's a tricky piece of software to write, and I don't think there's a ton of demand for it. I think it's starting to grow, and I think in the next 5 years you'll see that grow. But yeah, I think that there's not too much demand. A lot of people say, hey, Zoom kind of does that, let them do that. But I think there is opportunity, especially if you can come in, build some quality software that is at a competitive price. I think there's definitely opportunity for that. And maybe we'll see that in the next 5 years. Maybe, hey, I'll use the buzzword maybe with AI and
Yeah,
some of the tools that people are writing, these code assistants, we're going to get more cheaper software in the next 5 years. Who knows? We'll see. But there's not a ton. And so, I think that for that reason, you have to be pretty judicious with your decision process, right? You can't just say, oh, I'll try this. Okay, that doesn't work. Try this. Oh, that doesn't work. Try this. You gotta be pretty specific and be willing to kind of pick a horse and really run with it. So just to kind of summarize there. So yeah, we talked about kind of the different criteria, a couple of the big ones that we know people use, Zoho Webinar, Zoom Webinar, and GoToWebinar. What would you say in general, right? Is there one that you'd say, okay, yeah, do you know what? Let's simplify this whole episode. Let's distill it to a one-liner. Can you simplify it to a one-liner? Or is it like a lot of these things that we talk about dependent on your situation?
I was gonna say use Zoom, but I
Okay.
mean, just because like it's just such a good experience for your clients and you. So I would lean that way, even though we don't as a
Maybe we
business.
need to follow our own advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll correct that and say it really does depend, although I'm being emotional with Zoom. It's like if you're a high volume shop that has a lot of drip automation that needs to happen pre and post the webinar, and you need to track if people are showing up and change statuses in a CRM, and your CRM is Zoho, it's not that bad quality to justify going to Zoom.
Always a bad pitch when you say, hey, it's not that bad. So
It
maybe,
was really bad pre-COVID. I remember they
I
adjusted
bet.
their audio lines and made those good.
Yeah.
And then it took forever to adjust the video lines, but now they're both good, but
Not
not
great.
as good.
No,
Yeah.
it's not as good. So maybe we need to listen to our own advice. Maybe that's maybe what the fun of
Yeah.
this podcast, and these conversations is,
Yeah,
hey,
tell the team
we,
tomorrow,
we
rip it all out.
yeah, we find some blind spots for ourselves. But I mean, it's always good to question those
Yeah.
assumptions and say, because I think you are right in a lot of cases. I always like to quote Ricky Bobby on this, which is saying, hey, if you ain't first, you're last, right? So Zoom is definitely first, and you want to hitch your wagon to the horse that's in first, not in last. And so, yeah, hey, maybe it's some advice that we can think for ourselves. And I think you're right, though, right? Is that, hey, if you look across all these dimensions, it's especially from the perspective of saying, hey, given the best client experience, Zoom is right up there. And hey, maybe that'll change in 4 or 5 years. And I think that's another kind of good lesson with this is, hey, just because a decision makes sense today and is the right thing for you today doesn't mean that it's the right thing tomorrow. And always review it.
Yeah.
Always be diligent in what makes the most sense for your business.
This is reminding me, I don't know, you're not big on social, but there's this clip that went around of Elon Musk walking this guy through his SpaceX factory. And the
Hmm.
guy is questioning him, a big YouTuber, saying, why'd you make the
What
rocket?
YouTuber? Do you know? Would
No,
I
I
know?
could find you the
Okay.
video though. But
No,
he's like,
it's okay.
why'd you make the top of the rocket out of X and the bottom of the rocket out of Y? And then Elon starts explaining it. And then as he's explaining, he's like,
Question.
actually, we should just make the whole thing out of X. We're going to do that tomorrow. And then the guy comes back in a year and he's like, yeah, in that meeting, we decided and shifted the
Yeah.
whole focus of the rocket.
Yeah.
So I think we just maybe had that.
Yeah, there are rocket moment. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think maybe the lesson I hear from that with that story is that, hey man, this is Elon Musk here. This guy, who knows more about rockets in the world than
Yeah.
Elon Musk? And it's about being humble with that, right? He was humble enough to listen to this YouTuber, might not know a ton about rockets, but admit his own ignorance and take that advice and then execute on it, right?
Yeah.
So he probably didn't hem and haw on that. He said, I'm going to do this tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Elon Musk so great is his ability to execute. So maybe that's the takeaway in all this is, hey, be humble, question your assumptions, and have great execution. I think if you do those three things, you're going to be in a good spot.
And
So,
if you join the next Blue Mortgage webinar, it'll be on Zoom
uh,
webinar.
oh man, Now that's recorded. Now we can't go back. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Well, Massimo, as always, thanks for this. For everyone watching and listening, thank you so much. We really do appreciate the support. If you found this useful at all we ask is share this with one of your broker colleagues, just one. That's how we grow, just one at a time. Yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.